Outlander Season 7 Part 2 is approaching after a number of significant turns and twists in Part 1. Since the start of the series, Jamie, Claire, and the rest of their family have undoubtedly experienced a great deal, with little time to recover between each new catastrophe. Nevertheless, these individuals are doing their hardest to live fulfilling lives in both the 18th and 20th centuries as Outlander approaches its 8th and final season. But something always finds a way to get in the way, and the catastrophes of Outlander Season 7 Part 1 will surely lead to further surprises in Part 2. Diana Gabaldon's 7th and 8th Outlander novels, An Echo in the Bone and Written in My Own Heart's Blood, serve as the inspiration for the events of Outlander Season 7. The first, which was divided into two sections, was released in June 2023 and described what happened after Claire Fraser was taken into custody for the murder of Malva Christie. After a brief moment of happiness at being reunited with their Scotland family, Claire and Jamie are destined to be split up once more as Outlander Season 7 Part 2 progresses. There will undoubtedly be much more to come, which is why it is even more important to review the major events of Outlander Season 7 Part 1. Outlander Season 7 Part 1 began with Jamie frantically attempting to reunite with Claire, who was imprisoned for the murder of Malva. In the end, he couldn't, and since the Revolutionary War was just getting started, Claire probably wouldn't have the opportunity to defend herself in court for months, if not years. But when Tom Christie admitted to killing his own daughter, he saved Claire. Naturally, this confession was untrue. Tom wants to sacrifice his life to save Claire because he loves her. When Claire got back to Fraser's Ridge, she discovered that Alan, Tom's son, had actually killed Malva. For a while, Claire thought the entire family had tragically died when Ian killed Alan. She eventually found out, though, that Tom had not actually been hanged. Even though Claire and Jamie moved on from this, there's a chance that Tom Christie will reappear in Outlander Season 7 Part 2. In Outlander Season 7 Part 1, Brianna and Roger welcomed Amanda, a stunning baby girl. But Claire soon saw the baby's physical symptoms, which indicated that she had a cardiac condition common in newborns. Unfortunately, in the 18th century, Amanda could not be saved. Brianna and Roger would have to go back to the 20th century, when doctors had the tools necessary for such a treatment, if she survived. After going back to their own era, Brianna and Roger remained in Scotland and purchased Lallybroch, the house where Jamie grew up. This family lived at the castle of her ancestors for a number of years in Outlander Season 7 Part 1, and by the beginning of Part 2, Amanda is content and well. After discovering an ancient obituary claiming that the Frasers perished in a house fire, Brianna and Roger had journeyed back in time to the 18th century in order to save Jamie and Claire. Before going back to the 20th century, they believed they had accomplished their objective because the date of this incident came and went. The date on the obituary was incorrect, though, as the devastating fire was finally realized when Wendy Donner arrived at Fraser's Ridge in Outlander Season 7 Part 1. In order to return to his own time, Wendigo, who was also a time traveler, was in dire need of diamonds. He smashed bottles of ether on the floor as he looted the Fraser house, then struck one of Brianna's matches to get brighter light. The home exploded as a result, but only Wendigo and his crew perished. In Outlander, however, this turn of events showed the possibility of a self-fulfilling prophecy, since if Brianna and Roger had returned to put out the fire, it would not have occurred. Jamie eventually discovered that the concealed treasure discovered during Wendigo's examination of the Fraser residence was the lost Jacobite gold. Originally intended to help Bonnie Prince Charlie's bid to become King of England, this fortune was split among Dougal Mackenzie, Jamie's aunt Jocasta's first husband, and Hector Cameron after the endeavor failed. Archbug stole a portion of the gold from Jocasta and concealed it in Claire and Jamie's house because he was angry that he hadn't received any of it. Jamie effectively took the gold away from Mr. Bug, and he and Ian kept an eye on it since they thought the man may come back to get it. He was almost right, but when Jamie and Ian attempted to stop Mrs. Bug from stealing the Jacobite gold, she opened fire. Sadly, the elderly woman passed away during the endeavor. Jamie concealed the gold in a cave that he and Jemmy had previously discovered together since he knew that other people would undoubtedly want it as well. Then, in a future letter to Roger and Brianna, he provided them with a hint that would enable Jemmy to find the gold. Two Quakers, a doctor named Denzel Hunter and his sister Rachel, were introduced to Ian in Outlander Season 7 Part 1. Ian and Rachel clicked right away, and soon they were kissing each other in a subtle way. However, she reprimanded Ian and informed him that a relationship would not be feasible after he kissed her. Ian finally consented, not just because he feared reprisals from Mr. Bug after his wife's death, but also because he didn't want Rachel to be rejected by the Quakers, like her brother. Ian offered Mr. Bug his life after unintentionally killing Mrs. Bug, but the elderly man declined. He said that the deal was not equivalent and that he would accept what was owed to him when Ian offered something valuable. Ian was constantly watching him during Outlander Season 7 Part 1, so this was a rather effective threat. Since Mr. Bug was seen approaching Rachel Hunter at the close of Part 1, it appeared that he had indeed persevered. Nevertheless, what he does to her will have to wait for Outlander Season 7 Part 2. In the 20th century, Jemmy was in a lot of problems and blamed the fairy folk for everything. But when bigger items started to vanish from the house, Jemmy was certain that the Knuckleby, not him, was to blame. Roger went to investigate after spotting a stranger looking through the window, but his parents didn't trust him. This individual turned out to be Roger's ancestor William Mackenzie, who had inadvertently passed through the stones. Lallybrock considered William to be family, thus he became an extended guest. He became somewhat of a friend to the kids of Roger and Bree. Despite the Mackenzies' early doubts about his reliability, Buck was able to win their friendship and defend their house in the 20th century. In Outlander Season 7 Part 1, Brianna was able to secure employment, but gaining the respect of the men she oversaw was not an easy task. They once imprisoned her in a system of tunnels beneath the ground. Fortunately, astute Bree had no trouble figuring out how to get away. She was shocked to find, however, a peculiar rippling fog beneath the surface that made the same buzzing noise as the wandering stones. Brianna made her way home in her own time, running through the fog without any problems. After talking it over with Roger and consulting some maps, they came to the conclusion that Bree had found the Lee line and that the stones had been placed where these lines connect. As a result, it was concluded that time travel is linked to Lee lines worldwide. Outlander Season 7 Part 1 finally revealed why Rob Cameron, one of Brianna's co-workers, made an effort to become close to the Mackenzies. Cameron obtained and read Roger's manuscript, which described their time travel adventures and the secret Jacobite gold, and who knows where it is hidden, after Bree unintentionally packed it with his teaching supplies. Cameron referred to what Roger had written as science fiction, acting as though he didn't believe it. But when he asked Jemmy to go to a movie with him and his nephew, the truth comes out. Brianna and Roger concurred that they had no suspicions, but Buck and little Amanda felt that something more was happening. When Roger and Brianna arrived at the stones and saw Jemmy's scarf, they deduced that Cameron had sent the youngster there in order to locate the Jacobite gold. Roger and Buck are searching through the stones to locate Cameron and bring Jemmy back when we last see them in Outlander Season 7 Part 1. The issue is that these characters are still learning how to travel across time. Roger could only think about his son and pray that he would be taken to him because it's uncertain exactly when Cameron would have traveled. In the event that Cameron and Jemmy returned, Brianna remained behind with little Mandy. The boy was clearly transported to a different era, though, when Mandy claimed that she could no longer feel Jemmy because they have a strong, invisible bond. Of course, we won't know for sure until later. For the entirety of Outlander Season 7 Part 1, Jamie and Claire were excited to get back to Scotland, but something constantly seemed to stand in their way. But when Jamie was asked to return home with Brigadier General Simon Fraser's body, they finally got what they wanted. Jamie and Claire have decided where they wanted to build their new home on Fraser's Ridge, so this wouldn't be a long-term move. But Outlander Season 7, Part 2's Scottish setting will undoubtedly make for a touching reunion.